on. All right, y'all. The day I never thought I would see Jordan Peterson having a sit-down talk with Destiny. A incel gamer. Never seen no pieces of work, bodies of work, pieces of content, gaming gameplay from this dude. But hey, let's go.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to announce for
like
many years.
Or when you look at like the fall of the
Hello, political commentator. He really came to my attention, I would say,
Here we go.
as a consequence of the discussion he had with Ben Shapiro and 𝘂𝗍𝗏, and I decided to talk to him, not least because it's not that easy to bring people who are identified, at least to some degree, with the political beliefs on the left into a studio where I can actually have a conversation with them. I've tried that more often than you might think. And it happens now and then, but not very often.
All right, here we go.
So today we talk a lot about, well, the differences between the left and the right and the dangers of political ideology per se and the use of power as opposed to invitation and all sorts of other often heated and contentious issues. And so you're welcome to join us. And I was happy to have the opportunity to do this.
Hey.
So I guess we might as well start by letting the people who don't know who you are get to
Yep.
know who you are with a little bit more.
Stop. Yes. Because who the fuck knows who Destiny is besides incel gamers? Who the hell is studying what the hell is inside of Destiny's mind? The incel gamer. And Destiny was a trash game. Here we go.
Precision.
Great
So
question, Jordan.
why have you become known and how has that developed?
pretty broad question.
Why? No, it's not. It's not a broad question, Stephen Bonnell. It's not Stephen Bonnet Boy. It's not a broad question. You just don't have a correct exact answer. Broad question. Here we go. Let's cook up.
Become known and how has that developed?
It's a pretty broad question. I think I started streaming around 15 years ago when it wasn't really a thing yet. There were a few people that did it. I started early on. I guess back then you weren't a professional gamer yet because the game had just started to come out, but there was a game called StarCraft 2, and I streamed myself playing that game. I was a pretty good player. It was pretty entertaining to watch, and then I kind of...
He's feeding his ego. He's feeding his ego. I gotta stop every time. I'm on y'all's incels' ass. I'm on it. I'm on it. Pretty damn good. No, you're feeding your ego. Entertaining to watch. Incels care about that. Real people with real responsibilities who don't have jerk-off problems do not care about that. You cannot help your hands from sitting in your lap because you're just always grabbing your nuts. Now, I don't give a damn what you do, but you got a severe jerk-off problem, and so do the incels who watch you and indulge in your content and type paragraph after paragraph in the comments and on the live streams and type paragraphs about what exactly? Nothing, because their feelings are fucked up for their jerk-off problem.
I grew over, I guess maybe the next 7 years, just streaming that people would watch.
Streaming on YouTube?
Well, back then, I started on a website called Livestream, then I switched to Ustream, then I switched to a site called Justin TV, and then that turned into Twitch.tv. So after streaming there for like 7 or 8 years, I was a semi-professional StarCraft 2 gamer. That game kind of came in.
So this gave him the validity to have a sit-down, not validity, this gave him the pedestal and the movement to go and have a sit-down conversation with Jordan Peterson, who's had multiple PhDs and professed at universities at length for decades. Like that's saying you can get a PhD in being a semi-pro gamer with StarCraft, whatever the shit is, nasty ass pickle juice toothpaste, StarCraft.
And went, but I had a lot of other interests. Around 2016, I started to get more involved into the world of politics. It's kind of a left-leaning figure because of my back.
Because you was mad at the world. Politics. What involvement did...
Kind of like esports and internet gaming and internet trash talk. I had more of a kind of like a combative attitude, and that was kind of rare for left-leaning people at the time. So it's basically where my early political popularity came from. I think from like 2016 to 2018 was debating
left-leaning incels, left-nutted incels.
wing people.
So was there a game-like element to the debating, do you think? And is that part of why that morphing made sense?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, if you get really reductionist, everything in life is kind of a game, but that's not very satisfying. I think I grew up like very argumentative. My mom is from Cuba, so my family was like very conservative, and then I grew up like listening to the news all day, listening to my mom's political opinions all day, and
yeah, because you didn't want to get a job because you were not worthy, you were not able, you were not canning enough, and that's what you felt. A little kid. Did you even go outside? No, because none of the kids wanted to play with you. You were not sociable. You were not socially engaged. You were not entertaining, interesting, nothing.
I argued with kids in high school and everything, and I've always been kind of like an argumentative.
Yeah, because you were getting picked on. Ain't nothing wrong with people getting picked on. So don't misuse my words. Y'all see what I'm doing here? I'm attacking a certain demographic here. Wake up. I'm attacking and asserting a certain demographic. A hit dog will always holler. Shut up.
Type A aggressive personality. So I think that probably lent itself well to the political stuff in 2016. Yeah.
Was that useful in gaming?
Of course.
That personality?
In some ways, yeah. In some ways,
toxicity?
no.
What you mean?
I don't know directly for the games itself. I don't know how much it necessarily mattered. But for all the peripheral stuff, in some ways it was really beneficial. I could kind of like cut out my own path, and I could be very unique, and I could kind of be on my own. In some ways, it was very detrimental.
There's no unique trash talkers. None. There's none. Unless you're from the hood and you outside and you've been with Unc and you've been at the barbershops. And there's no unique trash talkers, especially of your caliber, sir. All y'all know how to do is be racist, judgmental, sexist, prejudiced because y'all get nothing. Y'all feel nothing. In sales.
I can be very difficult to get along with, and I'm very much kind of like, I want to do this thing, and if you try to tell me what to do,
there you go.
I don't want to have like a sponsor or
exposing this up. There you go. Good. There you go. He's being honest. Good.
Team or anybody kind of with a leash on me. So yeah, I guess it worked out.
It's interesting because the temperamental proclivity that you're describing, that's associated with low agreeableness. And generally, well, and that's more combative, it's more stubborn, it's more implacable, it's more competitive. The downside is that it's more skeptical, it can be more cynical, it can be less cooperative. But generally, a temperament like that is not associated with political belief on the left, because the leftists tend to be characterized by higher levels of compassion, and that's low agreeableness. So, that element of your temperament.
Which one could argue more estrogen, less testosterone? Let's continue.
At least is quite masculine, and a lot of the that element of your temperament at least is quite masculine, and a lot of the ideology that characterizes the modern left has a much more temperamentally feminine nature. So,
there you go. Estrogen.
So, all right. So why do you think the shift from your popularity to political commentary worked? And you said that started about 2016.
And Jordan asked some great damn questions. I know he's been in the game for decades and decades and decades, but man, I'm realizing more and more how great this guy is.
And why do you think that shift happened for you?
Great question.
In terms of your interest.
I think I've always been interested in a lot of things. Like I grew up with a very strong political bend. It was conservative until I got into my streaming years, probably 5 or 6 years into streaming. I slowly kind of started to shift to the left.
There you go, grift. There you go, exposing himself. Grift. He was pandering and grifted. He was pandering, looking around, falling around, fucking off, hands in his pants. Oh shit, well this works and this gets money and I don't got to get a job and nobody can tell me what to do, so let's pander. Boom.
I would say that
that's what Jordan just found too.
I guess in around 2016, when I saw all of the conversations going on with the election and when all the issues being talked about, I felt like the conversations were very low quality. And in my naivety, I thought that maybe I could come in and boost the quality, at least in like my little corner of the internet, to have better conversations about what was going on. And so that was basically my injection point into all of that was, yeah, fighting about those political issues and then arguing with people about them, doing research and reading and all of that, yeah.
And so did you do that by video to begin with as well?
Yeah, it was all streaming, yeah.
It was all streaming. And so I presume you built an audience among the people who were following you as a gamer first, and then that started to expand. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah. Without getting too much into like the business or streaming side of things, basically, actually, this probably carries over to basically to all media, I would imagine, is you've got people that will watch you for special events. So maybe you're like a commentator of the Super Bowl, or maybe you're hosting like a really huge event. Then you've got people who will watch you every time you're participating in your area of expertise. So for me, that's like a particular game I might be playing. It might be when you're on like a particular show or something that people watch you for. And then the fundamental fan, like the best fan that you're converting to the lowest and most loyal viewer, I guess, is somebody that's watching you basically no matter what you're doing. And these are the people that'll follow you from area to area.
And shout out to the fam, the actual people, because hey, y'all don't really got too much of them. You incels who have jerk off issues, y'all don't got too much of them. All y'all can relate is y'all place of exclusivity. Y'all have been excluded out of everything, family functions, social gatherings, because y'all are weird. Y'all are incels and y'all have jerk off issues. Bad problems. 𝗵𝗫𝗍, what up? Y'all got bad jerk off issues, and that's how y'all can relate. Anything else, fail.
The area.
Right.
And I think because of the way I did gaming and I talked about a lot of other stuff, whether it was politics, science, current events, whatever.
But who gave you the, like, 𝗵𝗫𝗍? This is what's getting me. Because 𝗵𝗫𝗍, you can have a PhD over a 3-year span, 5-year span, 10-year span, right? You can have a PhD in being a crazy Star Trek gamer, a StarCrest gamer, whatever the hell, a Pokemon, Sega Genesis, Pac-Man gamer. What? Do you know the level in which Jordan Peterson is at in the world that he has put forth and studied and went through for colleges and universities and what? And this grifting ass incel can come up in the game. I ain't gonna say smooth, but come up in the game and talk about these type of, oh my Lord, who is this man? Good. I don't know where this going, YouTube, Patreon. Do y'all see this? Who the fuck? Nobody knows who the fuck in the real world. Niggas is not listening to a gamer on politics. You found your grift. You were pandering long enough and you was like, oh, let me talk about this type because it's going to bring me more revenue. It's going to bring me more limelight because I want to sit on my mama couch and watch the news and have my hands in my pants, being in my drawers all day. And I want to make money online because I don't want to get a job because I'm not likable. Nobody likes me. No girls like me. Shit. Did I say no girls like me? Exactly. You are not liked. And you don't like yourself. So, who is this man? Oh, somebody cooking. Somebody cooking, 𝗵𝗫𝗍. Ooh, okay.
I had a lot of loyal fans that kind of followed me wherever I went. So
loyal incels, correct that. Loyal incels, because they just looking at themselves in the mirror. Yeah, another man who loved to play Star Trek, who loved to play Pac-Man, who loved to play Sonic the Hedgehog. Another man who loved to play these games just like I do, living in my mama house with my hands in my pants. I just jerked off 3 times today. 3 times. Loyal jerk offists. How about that?
quite a few of them
so you'd
stuck in Star
established
Trek.
a reputation.
Yeah.
So how would you characterize your reach now? How would you quantify it?
I think well, can you be more precise?
How many people are watching a typical video that you might produce, and what are you doing for subscribers, say on YouTube, and total? Any idea about total reach?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess my subscribers on YouTube, I have around, I think that's around 770,000 on my main channel. I think I probably do between all 3 channels, I think around 15 to 20 million views a month. And then I live stream to anywhere from 5 to 15,000 concurrent viewers a day for hopefully around 8 hours a day.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have quite a substantial reach. And so you said that initially you were more conservative leaning, but that changed. What? Okay. What
Yep,
did it
get
mean
back on
that
that.
you were
The
more
information,
conservative leaning, and
the
how
pandering.
How
Watch,
and
here we
why
go.
did that change?
Watch.
When I said I was conservative leaning, I mean I was writing articles for my school newspaper defending George Bush and the Iraq War. I was like,
You were defending who? Oh, that's it. I mean, that's a seal the deal. Just lick the envelope, snap it, put the signature on it, send it over. Done.
like very much like I think it's like an insult now when people say like neocon, but I was like very much like a conservative, a Bush era conservative. So supported big business, supported traditional, all of the conservative, I guess, like foreign policy, you know, hawkish foreign policy, for whatever that meant as like a 14, 15-year-old.
Right.
There was the whole 𝗟𝗜𝗞𝗘 incident that was very big for Cuban Americans, where there was a Cuban boy that tried to come to the United States with several other people and his mother, and their raft, I guess, crashed or something happened. I think his mom died and some other people died, and there was a huge debate on whether or not to send him back to Cuba, and Clinton ended up sending him back to Cuba, and I know that my mom was super irritated and all that, to say the least. And then once I hit college, I think I supported Ron Paul in 2000, would have been 2008.
Oh, fuck
so I was a big
no.
Ron Paul libertarian guy in high school. When I went to a Catholic Jesuit high school, and I kind of became atheist in that process. I started reading Ayn Rand.
Oh, wow.
So I was very, 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 very conservative.
But on the libertarian end, it sounds
I
like
would say so. Yeah. Initially on the
that makes more sense in relationship to your temperament.
Sure, maybe, yeah.
Libertarian, yeah.
Initially, it was like Christian conservative, and then it became like libertarian conservative. Without my life, kind of took like a wacky path, and then as I started working, I kind of had to drop out of school. I was working, and then I got into streaming. And once I started streaming, I had a son. Basically, around the first year I started streaming.
Wow, you got a son? Lord Jesus. Incels breeding incels. Doomed.
As I started to go through life, and I went from kind of being in this like working poor position to making a lot of money, especially through the lens of my child, I saw how different life was when I had more money versus less. And I guess like the differences between what was available to me and then my child as I made more money while I was really wealthy versus not as wealthy, it kind of started to change the way that I guess.
So you got more attuned to the consequences of inequality? Is that
basically, I would
way
say,
of thinking about it?
yeah.
Okay, and so that, okay.
So guess what? He's talking about which is something that I can break down. He is talking about the ways in which he's seen and viewed riches. Now, he does have wealth, you know, but the ways in which he's seen and viewed riches, from being a poor, middle-class, hard-working man versus a streamer sitting down, pandering and grifting, going back to his incel ways on his mama couch with his hands in his pants, jerking off 5 times a day.
How did that lead you to develop more sympathy for left-leaning ideas, particularly?
I guess my core.
It's a whole lot of I guess going on, man. It's a whole lot of I guess. I'm thinking, what are they putting in milk nowadays? Goodness.
Beliefs have never really changed, but I think the way that those become applied kind of change. So much the same way that you might think that everybody deserves a shot to go to school and have an education. That might be like a core belief where, as a libertarian or conservative, I might think that as long as a school is available, everybody's got the opportunity to go and study. But maybe now, as like a liberal or progressive or whatever you'd call me, I might say, okay, well, we need to make sure that there's enough, you know, maybe like food in the household or some kind of funding program to make sure the kid can actually go to school and study, basically. So like the core drive is the same, but I think the applied principle ends up changing a bit based on what you think people's
So
individual
is your
sense are.
concern essentially something like the observation that if people are bereft enough of substance, let's say, that it's difficult for them to take advantage of equal opportunities, even if they are presented to them, let's say?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And you have some belief and correct me if I'm wrong, you have some belief that there is room for state intervention at the level of basic provision to make those opportunities more manifest.
Yeah, to varying degrees, yeah.
Okay. So let's start talking more broadly then on the political side. So how would you characterize the difference, in your opinion, between the left and the conservative political viewpoints?
Great question.
On a very, very, very broad level, if there's some, I would say if there's some like good world that we're all aiming for, I think people on the left seem to think that a collection of taxes from a large population that goes into a government that's able to precisely kind of dole out where that tax money goes. You're basically able to take the problems of society. You're able to scrape off, hopefully, not super significant amount of money from people that can afford to give a lot of money, and then through government programs and redistribution, you target those taxes essentially to people that kind of need whatever bare minimum to take advantage of opportunities in society. Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the conservative end, I guess a conservative would generally think that why would the government take my money? I think from a community point of view, through churches, through community action, through families, we can better allocate our own dollars to our own friends and family to help them and give them the things that they need so that they can better participate in and thrive in society, basically.
Okay, so one of the things that I've always found a mystery, I mean, I think there's an equal...
Because Jordan is a man, and this dude is not. So it's very difficult for Jordan to really even get situated with what the hell... I mean, he's doing his best because he's a clinical psychologist and therapist, but bro, like, I can't even... This is 2 hours. I thought he was going to react to the whole thing. This shit looking scruffy.
A mystery on the left and on the right in this regard is that the more conservative types tend to be very skeptical of big government, and the leftist types tend to be more skeptical of big corporations. Right? Well, so following through the logic that you just laid out, you made the suggestion that one of the things that characterizes people on the left is the belief that government can act as an agent of can and should act as an agent of distribution. Okay, a potential problem for that is the gigantism of the government that does that. Now, the conservatives are skeptical of that gigantism. And likewise, the liberals, the progressives in particular, we'll call them progressives, are skeptical of the reach of gigantic corporations.
Right.
And I've always seen a commonality in those two in that both of them are skeptical of gigantism. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about, generally speaking, with regard to the potential for the rise of tyranny is the emergence of giants. And one potential problem with the view that the government can and should act as an agent of redistribution is that there is an incentive put in place, two kinds of incentives. Number one, a major league incentive towards gigantism and tyranny. And number two, an incentive for psychopaths who use compassion to justify their grip on power, to take money and to claim that they're doing good. And I see that happening everywhere now particularly in the name of compassion. And it's one of the things that's made me very skeptical, in particular about the left, and at least about the progressive edge of the left. So I'm curious about what you think about those two. First of all, it's a paradox to me that the conservatives and the leftists face off each other with regard to their concern about different forms of gigantism, and don't seem to notice that the thing that unites them is some antipathy. This is especially true for the libertarians, some antipathy towards gigantic structures per se. And so then I would say, with regards to your antithesis between liberalism and conservatives, the conservatives are pointing to the fact that there are intermediary forms of distribution that can be utilized to solve the social problems that you're describing, that don't bring with them the associated problem of gigantism. And like it's been shocking to me.
It's a fairy tale.
To watch the left, especially in the last 6 years, ally itself, for example, with pharmaceutical companies, which was something I'd never thought I would see in my lifetime. I mean, for decades, the only gigantic corporations the left was more skeptical of than the fossil fuel companies were the pharmaceutical companies. And that all seemed to vanish overnight around the COVID time. So I know the story. That's a lot of things to throw at you, but it sort of outlines the territory that we could probably investigate productively.
Yeah, so a couple things. I would say that the current political landscape we have, I think, is less. I understand the concept of conservatives supporting corporations and liberals supporting like large government. I think today the divide we're starting to see more and more is more of like a populist, anti-populist rise, or even like an institutional or anti-institutional rise. So for instance, I think conservatives today in the United States are largely characterized with, I would say, with populism, in that they're supporting like certain figures, namely right now Donald Trump, who they think alone can kind of like lead them against the corrupt institutions, be them corporate or government. I feel like most conservatives today are not as trustful of big corporations as they were back in like the Bush era, where we would, conservatives would champion, big corporations.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
That's a strange thing, because it makes the modern conservatives a lot more like the 60s leftists.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, that brings us into the issue, too, of whether the left-right divide is actually a reasonable way of construing the current political landscape at all. And I'm not sure it is, but...
Right now it kind of is, but only because so many conservatives are following Trump. So like your populist, anti-populist thing kind of maps on kind of cleanly to the left and right. It doesn't work with progressives, though, or the far left, because they're also anti-large everything. So in a surprising way, on very, very far left people, you might find them having a bit more in common with kind of like a MAGA Trump supporter than like a center-left liberal. So for instance, like both of these groups of people on the very far left will be very dovish on foreign policy, probably a little bit more isolationist. They're not a big fan of like a ton of immigration or a ton of trade with other countries. They might think that there's a lot of institutional capture of both government and corporations. So both all of the MAGA supporters and the far, far left might think that corporations don't have our best interest at heart and the government is corrupt and captured by lobbyists. Yeah, you'll see a lot of overlap there.
Right.
I think that sometimes there's a couple things. One, this is something I feel like I've discovered. People have no principles. I think that people are largely guided by whatever is kind of satisfying them or making them feel good at the time. I think that's a really important thing to understand because people...
Wow. Wow. Projecting. He just said that. Wow. Yo, brother. Have you looked in the mirror? Did you even hear what you just said? Run it back for yourself.
Discovered people have no principles.
Okay.
I think that people are largely guided by whatever is kind of satisfying them or making them feel good at the time. I think...
Wow. And guess what made you feel good? Getting all that money because you had a newborn son, which it will with anybody, but guess what? It has the strong potential to stir you off track. And you ain't never had no track to begin with. You was always aimlessly wandering and pandering and just fucking off with incels. Gross tactic. Gross. Not backed by nothing. Not backed by shit. And you up here with Jordan Peterson. And before some of y'all would even say, well, are you saying this like you could do better in front of Jordan Peterson? And well, I'm a genuine man. I'm a real man. Okay? And that just stands alone. What are you talking about? Principles, politics of the universe. No, I'm not talking about actual politics. Politics of the universe, checks and balances, karmic debt, shadow work, shadow, dark night of the soul, man. I'm with all of that. Just don't even know what he's saying.
That's a really important thing to understand because people's beliefs will seem to change at random if you're
he's talking about himself. He's talking about himself. Oh my goodness. You ain't getting me mad though. You ain't getting me mad. He's talking about himself. Lord,
to imagine that a belief is coming from some underlying principle or is governed by some internal, like moral or a reasonable code or whatever. I think generally there are large social groups and people kind of follow them along from thing to thing, which is why you end up in strange worlds sometimes where, like the...
There you go. He's recollecting to him his life. He looked over because he's recollecting to his life. That's what people do whenever they speak. They either look up, recollecting a memory, or they look to the side like, okay, well, look...
which is why I think generally there are large social groups and people kind of follow them along from thing to thing, which is why you end up...
Look to the side and look up. He's recollecting his own life, projecting incest.
In strange worlds sometimes where, you know, like the position on vaccines and being an anti-vaxxer might have been seen as something, you know, 10 years ago as kind of like a hippie leftist, and now maybe it's more like a conservative, or it's associated more with like MAGA, Trump supporters or whatever. I think as a result of how the social groups move around. When it comes to the, you mentioned this like...
And it's damn sure how you moved, and how you got moved too.
Gigantism thing. That's another thing where I'm not sure if people actually care about gigantism or if they're using it as a proxy for other things that they don't like. Like, I could totally imagine a
Well,
person...
I care about it.
Sure, yeah, you might. Yeah, sorry.
There you go. Yes. Let me drop my nuts and show you who I am. Well, I care about it. Because it becomes confusing. It becomes too abstract. And look what he do.
That they don't like. Like, I could totally imagine a
Well,
person...
I care about it.
Sure, yeah, you might. Yeah, sorry. It just meant in general, yeah.
And Jordan Peterson, remember who he's talking to. He can't hurt the fragile little man, girl, child, thing, person. It can't disgruntle their whole feelings and emotions and way of life because it's already fucked up. They had a jerk off marathon going on for March.
Okay.
Because like I could imagine somebody saying that like they don't trust like a large government, they think there's too much you know, prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally, you know, one guy who has a direct line to God.
Right, but they can't tax.
Well, I mean, there's...
And they don't have a military.
That
and
is...
they can't conscript you.
And that's where I can possibly make another debate here because the military is the militant soldiers that give their money and give their energy and attention all to the Roman Catholic Church and the Catholic and Christian churches, even any church, you know, Presbyterian, Baptist churches give all of their soul, all of their energy to these churches. So they're going to stand and riot for and behind the churches.
True,
Right,
yeah.
and they can't throw you in jail.
That is true, yeah. I mean,
Right. Well, those are major and significant. I mean, I get the overlap. Don't get me wrong.
Sure, but I'm saying like even if you had a local government, like if you had a state government or a tribe, usually they've got some form of enacting punishment. It'll be sometimes more brutal, but they can throw you in jail. Conscription hasn't existed in the U.S. since the Vietnam War.
Yet.
I mean, yeah, true, yeah.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, I think that I guess when I look at
so this is so let's go back. Well, let's go back to to the redistribution issue. I mean, we pay 65% of our income at, say, middle class to upper middle class level in Canada. It isn't obvious to me at all that that money is well used. In fact, quite the contrary. In my country now, our citizens make 60% they produce 60% of what you produce in the U.S.
Wow.
That's plummeted over the last 20 years as state intervention has increased. I'm not convinced that the claim that the interests of people who lack opportunity are best served by state intervention. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, I'm aware of the relationship between inequality and social problem. There's a very well-developed literature on that, and it essentially shows that the more arbitrary, the broader the reach of inequality in a political institution of any given size, the more social unrest. So the broader the reach of inequality in a political institution of any given size, the more social unrest.
So the more we go away from the scrutiny is the okay, yeah, because there's more in the middle. There's a lot of, it's almost like having a big hamburger. Like we have to fill this, the bun is right here and the other bun is at the bottom, and we got to fill fucking 5 patties, cheese, damn near whole Caesar salad on the top, condiments, but that don't hold, no height. So yeah, okay.
So where all people are poor, there isn't much social unrest, and where all So where all people are poor, there isn't much social unrest, and
Where all people are poor, there is not much social unrest. Where all people are poor, there is not social unrest. Hold on, that's taking me a difficult time to, or taking me a little minute to digest. With all poor people, there is not that much, there is less social unrest. So they are unrest. Hold on, one more time.
unrest. So where all people are poor, there isn't much social unrest, and where all people are rich, there isn't much social unrest. But when
Okay, got it. There's not much social unrest. Yeah, because we're always occupied with other poor people in the crab in the bucket, and then with the rich people, we are vastly engaged in something. Yeah, okay.
there's a big gap between the two.
There you go.
There's plenty, and that's mostly driven by disaffected young men who aren't very happy that they can't climb the hierarchy.
Incels. Incels. Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson. Yes, sir. Here we go.
Are barriers in their way. And so there is reason to ameliorate relative poverty. The problem with that, to some degree, is that most attempts to ameliorate relative poverty tend to increase absolute poverty. And they do it dramatically. And the only solution that we've ever been able to develop to that is something approximating a free market system. I wouldn't call it a capitalist system because I think that's capture of the terminology by the radical leftists. It's a free exchange system. And the price you pay for a free exchange system is you still have inequality, but the advantage you gain is that the absolute levels of privation plummet. And I think the data on that I think they're absolutely conclusive.
Oh, the absolute levels of privation? Yeah, so you have, there's no,
Privation plummet. And I think the data on that I think they're absolutely conclusive.
Because all your information and data is open to everybody, every corporation. True.
Especially, and that's been especially demonstrated in the radical decrease in rates of poverty since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989. Because we've lifted more people out of poverty in the last 4 decades than we had in the entire course of human history up to that date. And that's not least because the statist interventionist types who argued for a radical state-sponsored redistribution lost the Cold War, right? And that freed up Africa to some degree, and certainly the Southeast Asian countries, to pursue something like a free trade economy. And that instantly made them rich, even China.
Wow.
So that's an argument, let's say, on the side of free exchange, but it's also an argument, a twofold argument, pointing out how we ameliorate absolute poverty, which should be a concern for leftists, but doesn't seem to be anymore, by the way, and also an argument for the maintenance of a necessary inequality. Like, I'm not sure that inequality can be decreased beyond a certain degree without that decrease causing other serious problems. And we can talk about that, but it's a complicated problem.
Yeah, for one point of clarification, when you say leftist, what do you mean by that?
Well, I was going with your definition, like essentially the core idea being something like the central problem being one of relative inequality and distribution of resources, and the central solution to that being something like state-sponsored economic intervention. I mean, there's other ways we could define left and right, and we can do that, but I'll stick with the one that you brought forward.
Yeah, but you brought it. Incel, remember? You brought it to the table, and as a clinical psychologist, we know that we're going to walk with you as much as we can. And that we can part is really until we go off this fucking cliff. Because that's where you are, that's where you head, that's where you reside, that's where you are mentally. And I don't want to be there. Fuck!
Forward to begin with.
Gotcha. Okay. I only want to be clear on that because because people get mad if I call myself a leftist. Oftentimes online or especially in Europe or worldwide, leftists will refer exclusively to like socialists or communists, and anybody to the right of that would be considered like a liberal.
This motherfucker has a Star Trek, and look, before you two, I don't know where this is going again, like I said, but before y'all even get to going crazy, the reason as to why I cannot and I will not hate on this person that we are looking at on the screen is because I do not want anything that he has. I don't aspire for any added knowledge that he has, any insight, because I am not going to allow my mind to stoop down to a place where he is. And I'm not mentioning and alluding to the fact that he is beneath me and I'm above him, okay? But also, I don't want nothing he has. Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I don't want nothing he has. Let's just get that clear.
If you
No,
believe, like,
usually a fascist.
Well, depending on who you're
Very
talking about.
rapidly.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear on that. So I'm absolutely a pro-capitalist, pro-free market guy. I'm never gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Now we cooking. Because Dan, what we're looking at is somebody who is a graduate, a 3-time graduate. You know how he went to university and Jordan Peterson did as well? Bro, this motherfucker is a 3-time graduate in Star Trek. And he is up here face to face with Jordan Peterson, yo. Like, that shit baffles me. Like, that gives you, and then because you're a mad, angry, raging, fucking sexist incel gamer, and you can just talk to other, wow, like that, like that's how we're gauging and doing, like, what? If that's the case, let me play 2K for 5 more years so I can have my PhD in 2K and I can go with 𝗬𝗓𝗏𝗏. Let me do that. Yeah, I played basketball. Like, I know I studied the game. I know the game, but let me do that, and I should be able to be upfront with 𝗬𝗓𝗏𝗏. Come on, it's not how the fucking shit works. But Jordan Peterson is doing his best as a actual man, a real genuine man, to make sense of this incel activity. What the fuck?
Okay, well that's good. It's good to get that clear. Why?
Yeah. Because I would argue that when you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of...
He can't help but to keep his hands in his pants and to keep his hands by his nuts because he has a massive, abusive, jerk-off issue. He is always in Discord and in the calls with his mans, or whatever the hell, and they're seeing who jerked off the most this week. Man, I don't get what the fuck we're talking about here. He can't stop moving his hands from there because his hands just naturally just go to his incel jerk-off problems.
Of like socialist or communist regimes. I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution. I think the problem...
That was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all, actually, I would say. I think the issue...
I don't think it was
command economies.
Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Wait a minute. What?
Yeah, we gotta stop that. We gotta stop that in the bud.
What do you mean redistribution wasn't an issue? What the hell do you think they did to the kulaks? That was forced redistribution. It resulted in the death of 6 million people. So maybe I'm not understanding what you mean, but that was redistribution at its like pinnacle.
Sure.
And forced redistribution. And it was brutal.
When I think of the strengths of capitalism.
Okay, now he's gonna make his own egotistical definition of the redistribution. Okay, you fucking incel gamer. My bad. Maybe you weren't able to fully dissect the situation at hand that happened because, oh shit, I forgot to jerk off today. Fuck. Or no, I forgot to jerk off for the 4th time today. Damn it. Okay.
The ability for markets to dynamically respond to shifting consumer demand is like the reason why capitalism and free market economies dominate the world. When you've got socialist or communist systems, command economies where a government is trying to say, this is how much this is going to cost, this is how much you're going to produce and make. This is a failed way of managing a state economy. Even in places where they still do it, there are always shadow economies and stuff. There were in the Soviet Union that prop up where people try to basically ameliorate the conditions that are resulting from said horrible command economy practices. So I guess in a way you could argue a command economy is kind of like redistribution. It's a form of it, but
no, it's a worse problem. If you're pointing to the fact that that's a worse problem, I'm with you
I would say that's
100%.
definitely the reason why these places failed, because they just weren't able to respond to changing conditions.
Okay, so what's the difference between
Going online without ExpressVPN is like leaving your kids with the nearest stranger while you go to the restroom. They're probably...
Nice segue. ExpressVPN, get it.
That's Jordan.
Is it a difference of a degree? Like,
That
are
was an
you
interesting
looking at
segue.
models, let's say, like the Scandinavian countries? Or I wouldn't use
I'm a gamer. I need ExpressVPN to sponsor us. We need it ASAP. Hit us up, DMs and emails, wide open.
Canada, by the way, because Canada is now, what would you call, predicted by economic analysts to have the worst performing economy for the next 4 decades of all the developed world. So maybe we'll just leave the
Canadians. So maybe I should not move there. Maybe I should not think about moving there or be there for a long period of time. Maybe like a year or so, a year and a half, you know, fucking 16 months.
the example of Canada off the table.
Wow.
Scandinavian countries are often the polities that are pointed to by, I would say, by people who, at least in part, are putting forward a view of redistribution for purposes of equality of opportunity like you are. But they're a strange analogy because they're very small countries, and up till now they were very ethnically homogenous. Exactly, and that makes a big difference when you're trying to flatten out the redistribution. Plus, they are also incredibly wealthy, which makes, redistribution, let's say, a lot easier. Why doesn't a government that's bent on redistribution fall prey to the pitfalls of command economy and forced redistribution, for that matter? How do you protect
Where are
against
their
that?
microphones?
I think
Where are their microphones? This is some great
you
audio.
have to do-
Oh, it's on top. It's like a news, not news, like I've seen Oprah do a sit down, like the red table talk type of thing, and they got the microphones that are like, yeah, okay, I'm my bad.
Dude, it's very, very, very difficult is people get very ideologically captured by both ends, and they feel very, I guess, like committed, or they feel very allegiant to pushing certain forms of economic organization. And I think sometimes it blinds them to some of the benefits of what exists when you incorporate kind of multiple models, or, I mean, you'd call them mixed economies, which is really what every capitalist economy today is. It's some form of free market capitalism combined with some form of like government intervention to control for negative externalities. These are the ways that all economies, even in Scandinavia and the world, work. And I think that recognizing the benefits of both systems are the best way to make things work. Yeah.
Fair enough. And the Scandinavian countries seem to have done a pretty good job of that. But like I said, they have a simpler problem to solve, let's say, than the Americans have.
Free market.
Negative externalities.
That's what he wants, man.
That's an interesting rabbit hole to wander down, because the problem I have with negative externalities, you made a case already
That's what he wants.
and again, correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think that I understood what you said. A free market, free exchange economy is a gigantic distributed computational device. Right, exactly. And
Which, funnily enough, one of the big problems for command economies is called the computation problem, because no central body can actually compute, the ins and outs of.
Right, exactly. Right, that's not, that's
And that's
a
not
fatal
something,
problem.
right? That's not something that we should be bragging about, and acting like that's something we should move towards.
Because it doesn't have the computational power. It certainly doesn't have the speed of data recognition. It doesn't have the on-the-ground agents if all of the perception and decision-making is centralized, right? It's way too low resolution. It's going to crash. Okay, and I think that that's comprehensible technically as well as ideologically. All right, but having said that, with regards to externalities, all the externalities that a market economy can't compute are so complex that they can't be determined centrally by the same argument. And
There are ways to account for them, though.
Really?
That work with.
Tell me.
Yeah.
How. Because
So
I can't see that. Because I can't see how that they can be accounted for without the same computational problem immediately arising.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I think that's a problem sometimes of people very far on the left when they want to deal with certain problems. I think that they want to bring like heavy-handed, you know, like things like price controls in to say, well, we need less of this, so let's just make this cost this particular thing, which ironically enough introduces a whole other set of externalities that will happen when you get a lot of friction between where your price floor or ceiling is set compared to what a market was set at. But ideally, if you're a reasonable person and you view economies as mixed.
Ideally, if you're a reasonable person, so conversation. He's alluding to separating his. He's alluding to separating the communist perspective and ideally,
economies, what you try to do is you try to take these externalities, meaning things that aren't accounted for with your primary system. So in a capitalist system, an externality might be something that causes a negative effect, but it doesn't cost you any money. Pollution would be a good example of that. And rather than saying like, well, no company can pollute this much, or, you know, if you're a company, you have to use these things because the other things are making too much pollution, all you do is you say, okay, well, if we've determined that, say, carbon is bad for the atmosphere, well, we're just going to attach a little price to that. The government is going to say that, yeah, if you pollute this much, here's the price, and then if you want to pay for it, you can, but
are you serious? This Star Trek fucking gamer, if he would have approached this idea, if he would have approached this idea to the government, it would sit back and fucking laugh at his dumb ass. The fuck is you talking about? I'm going back to it. I don't care. You see, I don't think he realizes while you are on a jerk-off marathon and you are in competition with other incels, you're not really thinking in your right mind, okay? Or, I would beg to differ that you guys don't even have a right mind. You don't really have a right mind. So you're coming out with these outlandish, and they camouflage it as being idealistic. No, it is incel-listic. That's what you are, an incel. You are in front of Jordan Peterson talking about worldly politics and activities, thinking that you have an ideal perspective of where to go and how to do it. Are you kidding me? Because you didn't want to get a job, you got a son, you were not appeasable and attractive to any, and let me make a correction here, you are not appeasable and attractive to anybody of your liking. So you had to just fuck off whoever fucked off on you, or whoever the fuck was drunk and had a fupa. But not just a regular, like a fat ass fupa. You had to fuck up on that disgusting piece of beef jerky. So,
that type of intervention in the economy basically allows the free market to hopefully do its job.
Jordan is a soldier, I'll tell you that.
A little bit of a price something that tries to account for the cost of that externality, yeah.
Great. That's a great example. We can go right down that rabbit hole. Carbon. Okay, so first of all,
here we go. Carbon.
One of the things I've seen, you tell me what you think about this, something that I've seen that actually shocks me, that I was interested in watching over the last 5 or 6 years. I wondered what would happen when the left, the progressives, ran into a conundrum. And the conundrum is quite straightforward. If you pursue carbon pricing and you make energy more expensive, then you hurt the poor. And I don't think you just hurt them. In fact, I know you just don't hurt them. I heard a man 2 days ago who's fed 350 million people in the course of his life, heading the UN's largest relief agency, make the claim quite straightforwardly that misappropriation on the part of interventionist governments increased the rate of absolute privation dramatically in the world over the last 4 or 5 years. And that has happened not least because of carbon pricing, not just carbon pricing, but the insistence that carbon per se is an externality that we should control. Now, Germany's paid a radical price for that, for example. So their power is now about 5 times as expensive as it could be. And they pollute more per unit of power than they did 10 years ago before they introduced these policies that were hypothetically there to account for externality. And the externality was carbon dioxide. I don't think that's a computable externality. And I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that it's actually an externality that we should be warping the economic system to ameliorate, if the cost of that, and it will be an increase in absolute privation among the world's poor. So, and here's an additional argument on that front with regards to externalities. You get that wrong, and here's something you could get right instead. If you ameliorate absolute poverty among the world's 1 billion poorest, they take a longer view of the future. And that means they become environmentally aware. And so the fastest route to a sustainable planet could well be the remediation of absolute poverty. And the best route to that is cheap energy. And we're interfering with the development of cheap energy by meddling with the hypothetically detrimental externality of carbon dioxide.
It's a fucking... It's a real man. That's a real man. I mean, I don't think we have to just go over that statement. And this incel is only saying this because he got fired from his job and he had a kid. And now, due to him stumbling upon this way of pandering and grifting on the internet, Dan, it's not, I know you asked, is he trolling? And you were serious with that question. I know you were. No, this is his lifestyle because he stumbled upon this grift. He stumbled upon these fucking incels. He stumbled upon this shit. So that's why he's saying we need to increase the tax on carbon. Because now he's coming along with this wealth. Or, I ain't gonna say wealth. With these riches because of his subscriber count and the views that he got and the clout and whatnot. Bro, remember, you are a star. Remember your roots, buddy. You are a Star Trek fucking gamer. You have a PhD in Star Trek. You have a PhD in Star Trek, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Pac-Man. And you are up here with Jordan Peterson. Pipe down. All you incels watching and feeding off of this. Because you're like, oh yeah, that's me up there too. Yeah, that's me. I'm living through Destiny. Yeah. Wrong Destiny, dumbass. Wrong one. Choose your own fate. Mortal Kombat mother.
And so... I think this is a complete bloody travesty, by the way. We are putting the lives of hundreds of millions of people directly at risk right now to hypothetically save people in the future, depending on the accuracy of our projections 100 years out. And these interventionists, these people who are remediating externalities, they actually believe that they can calculate an economic projection 1 century out. That's utterly delusional.
So, okay, so just as to be clear, the first thing.
Just say retarded, Dan. Just say retarded.
I was just giving an example of how you can use like a government intervention to make a free market track something.
Going back.
Which is what cap and trade or like carbon taxes would do. I wasn't necessarily speaking to the strength of that individual thing, but
yeah, but that's a good thing to focus on.
Yeah, we can focus on that as well.
Externality.
Yeah, we can focus on that as well. So the first thing, this is going to sound mean, but I'm very realistic. There needs to be a better argument.
Yep.
Yeah, we can focus on that as well.
Externality.
Yeah. We can focus on that as well. So the first thing, this is going to sound mean, but I'm very realistic.
But is the realistic part playing 17 hours of League of Legends and Sonic the fucking Hedgehog and Gerber the baby? Is that what we're calling realistic and idealistic? I'm sure. Okay, let's continue.
There needs to be a better argument than just it disproportionately impacts the poor. That's not
a
always.
Classic.
You finna move the
leftist argument.
There might be a
but it's the same argument you made to justify your swing to the left at the beginning of our discussion. You said that you were looking.
Jordan, I feel the same way, bro. Jordan, you see me, right? I'm all backing up in my chair. Yeah, same way, bro.
Economic inequalities that disproportionately affected the poor. So I can't see why. And I'm not trying to be mean about this either. I can't see why you could base your argument that it was morally appropriate for you to swing to the left from your previous position because you saw disproportionate effects on the poor. And I can't use that argument in the situation that I'm presenting it right now.
Well, because it depends on if we think it's a condition that ought to be remedied or not. For instance, if I walk around and I see homeless people and I'm like, man, this is really sad. We ought to spend more money on homeless people because it seems like they're disproportionately affected by their living conditions. And then
which you wouldn't say.
Somebody says, oh, well, do you think we should still lock up, rapists and murderers? Aren't they disproportionately poor? I'd probably say, well, yeah, we probably should. And I go, well, isn't that hypocritical? Well, no, I think that rapists and murderers should probably be in jail, but we can also help the homeless at the same time. I think that just helping the poor isn't an argument like a blank check to do every possible thing to satisfy poorer people.
Right,
It's going to depend on
Yeah,
the
I
individual.
agree too.
fine.
So, like, for
But
instance,
that's
I think
because the poor, everyone who's poor is not a victim.
Right.
Some people who are poor are psychopathic perpetrators.
Sure.
And it's very useful to distinguish them. But I was making a much more
fucking
specific
logic and
argument.
some testosterone
My
in the
argument was
equation
that
here,
the
people.
fastest way out of absolute privation for the world's bottom billion people is through cheap energy.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. So I just working my way towards that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that just because something targets the poor is not necessarily an argument against it.
Depends on how hard it targets them, and it depends on whether mass starvation is the outcome.
The outcome is important. That I agree with. So, for instance, like a sin tax, taxes on
the
like
outcome will be mass starvation.
I'm
in
getting
this
to it. Okay.
situation.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Okay. Sin taxes on like cigarettes and alcohol are always going to disproportionately impact the poor, or even sugar, we might say, right? But just because that disproportionately impacts
Definitely
the poor,
sugar.
is that a good thing or a bad thing? These are probably the people that suffer the most from those particular afflictions.
Right.
So,
and that is an
tax that
immediate
targets-
versus delayed
It
issue
is.
too, right? Because the reason,
Is it immediate? I mean, obesity isn't immediate. I don't think alcoholism
the
is.
reason for the tax is to stop people from pursuing a certain form of short-term gratification at the cost
sure.
of their longer-term well-being.
Correct. And that exact same idea, if you believe climate models, or if you believe that we're heading in a certain direction in terms of climate, the overall warming of the planet, would be the same argument you would make for climate change.
Only if you believe that you could model economic development 100 years into the future.
Well, we're not talking about, we're more concerned with modeling climate development, economic development.
We're
Yes,
equally
absolutely.
okay. Tell me how I'm wrong. I don't believe that, because what I see happening is two things. We have climate models that purport to explain what's going to happen over a century on the climate side.
And that's why we have to remain firm. We have to stay together and remain firm. That's all.
We have economic models layered right on top of those that claim that there's going to be various forms of disaster for human beings economically as a consequence of that climate change. And so that's like two towers of Babel stacked on top of one another. And so, because if people were just saying, oh, the climate's going to change, there'd be no moral impetus in that. It's the climate's going to change,
Finally on
and
the
that's
plane?
going to be disastrous
Hey, let us know
for
where you land,
the
bro.
biosphere and for humanity. But that's an economic argument as
travels,
well as
man.
a climate-based argument.
It's both, but the worst projections of what would happen if the climate took a disastrous turn are worse than the worst projections of what is our planet going to look like economically if we hardcore police,
Right. But
fossil
why
fuels.
would you? Okay, but
So
I don't
the argument-
understand the distinction
the
between the models.
Well, the argument would be that whatever pain and suffering poor people might endure right now because of a move towards green energy, that pain and suffering is going to be short-term and far less than the long-term pain and suffering.
Right, but
that
that's
comes along
dependent
with,
on the integrity of the economic models and
the climate models as well, right?
Right, exactly,
Of course,
but is in exactly the stacked manner that I described. And like, there's nobody in 1890 who could have predicted what was going to happen in 1990 economically. Not a bit, not a bit.
That's
and
tough.
and if we think we can predict like 50 years out now with the current
lit,
rate of
Beachbag, you
technology
lit.
and calculate the potential impact of climate change on economic flourishing for human beings, we're deluded. No one can do that. And then, it's worse. So imagine that as you do that and you project outward, your margin of error increases. That's absolutely, definitely the case. And at some point, certainly on the climate side, the margin of error gets rapidly to the point where it subsumes any estimate of the degree to which the climate is going to transform. And that happens even more rapidly on the economic side.
Potentially,
And so,
but I think right now, this is a disagreement on the fact of the matter, though, not the philosophy of what we're talking about in terms of controlling externalities.
Oh my
If we
God,
think,
bro.
I'm curious, let's say that we think we can accurately predict the climate and the economic impact, and we think that the climate impact would be far worse if we don't account for that, both in terms of human
I
conditions
don't believe any of those presumptions. I
Sure,
think
but
they're
then
both
if you
faulty.
don't, but I mean, like, obviously, if I agreed with that factual analysis, I would probably agree with you on the prescription here too, right? If
Well,
I thought
I
that like
don't-
none of the climate models were accurate or couldn't accurately predict anything,
They're
then I'd
not
also say why make?
well, they're not sufficiently accurate. That's the first thing. And because they have a margin of error, and it's a large margin of error, they don't even model cloud coverage well.
Oh, my
That's a
goodness.
big problem. They don't have the resolution. They don't have nearly the resolution to produce the accuracy that's claimed by the climate apocalypse mongers.
People
Not even
keep saying
close.
that, but we just got another one of the hottest years on record. How many times are we going to have another hottest year on record? How many times are we going to have an increase of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere before we're finally like, okay,
I don't know.
Because they keep turning the knob and amplifying it. What don't you get? It's controlled climate change. What don't you get about that?
No. And the reason I don't know is because it depends. The scientific answer to that question depends precisely on the time frame over which you evaluate the climate fluctuation. And that's actually an intractable scientific problem. So you might say, well, if you take the last 100 years, this variation looks pretty dismal. And I'd say, well, what if you took the last 150,000 years, or the last 10,000, or the last 10 million? You can't specify the time frame of analysis.
The time frame is incredibly important. That would be like saying, look at your, let's say somebody developed cancer and they didn't realize it, and the person has lost, 40 or 50 pounds in the past 6 months, and I'm just like, you look very sickly. And you're like, okay, well, look at my weight fluctuation over the past 10 years. You say, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters
I'm
is
not
the fact
saying
that
the time frame isn't important.
Well, but I'm saying
that it is important.
Yeah,
I'm saying I don't know how to specify it.
Well, you would probably specify it with the beginning of the industrial age, right?
Why?
Because that's when carbon dioxide, which is a gas that's seen as trapping more heat on the planet,
Why is that relevant to the time over which you compute the variability?
Because it seems like as carbon dioxide has increased in the atmosphere, the surface temperatures have risen at a rate that is a departure from what we'd expect over 150,000 year cycles of temperature variations on the planet.
No, not with that time frame. That's
Absolutely.
just not the case.
It's absolutely the case.
No, what do you mean? You just flipped to 150,000 year time span.
What I'm saying is that if we expect to see a temperature do this in a 150,000 year time span, in a 100 years time span, seeing it do this, that's very worrying. Now,
you mean like Michael Mann's hockey stick, the one that's under attack right now in court by a major statistician who claimed that he falsified his data? I mean, that spike?
I'm talking about the record temperatures that have been declared for like the past 5 years that have also increased with the concentration of parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that every model is perfect.
They're not
right
perfect.
Now, sure, but right now we're like standing in traffic with our eyes closed saying the car hasn't hit me yet, so I don't think there's any coming. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I
think that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have
because Jordan studies things and is tapped into things that, as a man, that this incel of a Star Trek gamer is not. So I have nothing to even.
Terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure. This isn't data. This is guess, and there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird. This isn't data. This is guess, and there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said. And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now with this insistence that, we're so compassionate that we care about the poor 100 years from now. And if we have to wipe out several 100 million of them now, well, that's a small price to pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before.
Oh, yeah.
And the alternative to that is to stop having global level elites plot out a utopian future, or even.
Now, this is a real man. This is a real man. Did you hear that? 44 minutes in, one of the strongest statements has been said.
An anti-dystopia before. And the alternative to that is to stop having global level elites plot out a utopian future, or even an anti-dystopian future.
Because it's not for us.
And that's exactly what's happening now with organizations like the WEF. And if this wasn't immediately impacting the poor in a devastating manner, I wouldn't care about it that much, but it is. I watched over the course of the last 5 years the estimates of the number of people who were in serious danger of food privation rise from about 100 million to about 350 million. That's a major price to pay for a little bit of what would you say for progress on the climate front that's so narrow it can't even be measured.
I don't think the increase in hungry people on the planet is because of climate policies.
Why not?
Because I don't think that countries in Africa are being pushed away from fossil fuels. I mean, most developing nations.
Of course they are. Right? They can't even get loans from the World Bank to pursue fossil fuel development. And there's plenty of African leaders who are screeching at the top of their lungs about that because the elites in the West have decided that, well, it was okay for us to use fossil fuel so that we wouldn't have to starve to death and our children had some opportunities. But maybe the starving masses that are too large a load for the world anyways shouldn't have that opportunity. And that's direct policy from the UN, fostered by organizations like the WEF. They're going to have to turn to renewables. Yeah, well, good luck with that, because renewables have no energy density. Besides that, they're not renewable and they're not environmentally friendly. And then one more thing, there's one more weird thing underneath all of this.
Okay.
I may just make a part 2, y'all. I may just make a part 2 because this, and like I'm gonna skip forward a little bit and probably like this would be a good one. There are too many people on the planet. Like this is killing brain cells, man. This is killing me. And because I'm putting myself in Jordan Peterson's mind and body during this interview, and like his blood is just fuming through his legs, his calves, his feet, like he's. Whereas Destiny's just moving the goalposts and literally just taking his notebook and just writing shit, putting it down. Well, I think you know what. Well, let's make this clear. You know, he's not like it's.
Well, let's say if carbon dioxide was actually your bugbear and it was genuine. Well, then why wouldn't the Greens, for example, in Africa, the progressives, be agitating to expand the use of nuclear energy? Especially because Germany has to import it anyways, especially because France has demonstrated that it's possible. We could drive down the cost of energy with low-cost nuclear, and there'd be no carbon production. And then the poor people would have something to eat because they'd have enough energy. And that isn't what's happening. And that's one of the things that makes me extremely skeptical of the entire narrative. It's like two things. The left will sacrifice the poor to save the planet. And the left will deindustrialize even at the nuclear level, despite the fact that it devastates the poor. And that's even worse because if you devastate the poor and you force them into a short-term orientation, in any given country where starvation beckons, for example, they will cut down all the trees and they will kill down all the animals and they will destroy the ecosphere. And so even by the standards of the people who are pushing the carbon dioxide externality control, all the consequences of that doctrine appear to me to be devastating even by their own measurement principles. We're trying to fix the environment. Well, boys and girls, doesn't look like it's working. All you've managed to do is make energy 5 times as expensive and more polluting.
And more buildings.
You were wrong. That didn't work. And I can't understand. You can help me. That's why you're here today talking to me.
Nope. No, the hell you can't, Jordan. And I know this is your empathetic, compassionate ways of operating and your humanistic, actual realistic, socialization kicking in. But, fuck, hey.
I can't understand how the left can support this.
Just one quick thing. Let's say that everything you've said is true. What do you think is the plan then? What is the goal? What is the drive?
That is, oh my good. Yeah.
Like, why push obviously horrible ideas for the planet and the poor?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, because you're positing it, right? So what do you think is the driver goal?
Well, I listen to what people say.
Oh, hell no.
Here's the most terrible.
Did he just do that? 47 seconds in after Jordan just did this array of data and facts and evidence and cues. Did he just really say, okay, well, let's just like almost like giving up like the incel jerk off marathon master you are, fucking masturbator, okay? Well, let's bait and switch here. So, okay, well, let's just say everything that you said is true. He probably ain't write down a fucking thing. Let's just say what you said is true. So what's the plan next? Like, go fetch, nigga. Like, he just took the football. He just took the whole game out of everybody's hands. The referee blew the whistle. Give me the football. Go long. Hey, I blew the whistle. I don't give a fuck. Threw that bitch 70 yards and threw it away from the receiver. Like, oh my gosh, bro.
The thing they say. There are too many people on the planet. Okay, so who says that? I've heard people say that for 30 years.
That is true.
Perfectly ordinary, compassionate people.
That
Well,
is
there's
true.
too many people on the planet.
Oh, yeah?
And I think, well,
It's
for me,
influence.
that's like hearing Satan himself take possession of their spine and move their mouth. It's like, okay, who are these excess people that you're so concerned about? And exactly who has to go, and when, and why, and how, and who's going to make that decision? And even if you're not consciously aiming at that, you are the one who uttered the words. You're the ones who muttered the phrase. What makes you
That thing
think that the thing
disgusting?
that
No, it's
possessed
not. Hell
you
no.
to make you utter that words isn't aiming at exactly what you just declared? And so that's a terrible vision. But when you look at what happens in genocidal societies, and they emerge with fair regularity, and usually with a utopian vision at hand, the consequence is the mass destruction of millions of people. So why should I assume that something horrible isn't lurking like that right now, especially given that we have pushed a few 100 million of people back into absolute poverty when we were doing a pretty damn good job of getting rid of that? And I just don't understand what's happening in Germany or in the UK. Like, it's insane. Like, look, man, if they would have got rid of the nuclear plants and made energy 5 times as expensive, and the consequence would have been they weren't burning lignite coal as a backup, and their unit production of energy, of pollution per unit of energy had plummeted, you could say, well, look, we hurt a lot of poor people, but at least the air is cleaner. It's like, no, air's worse, and everyone's poorer. So, explain to me how the hell the left can be anti-nuclear.
Okay.
I don't understand it at all.
Gotcha. All right. This is something that I brought up earlier that is concerning to me. I feel like when people get political beliefs, I feel like what happens is, what we think happens, what we would hope happen is you have some moral or philosophical underpinning, and then from there, you combine this with some epistemic understanding of the world, and then you combine these two things, you engage in some form of analysis, and through your moral
it'd be
view,
nice if that was
you,
true.
yeah, you start to apply like prescriptions. So maybe I'm religious, maybe I analyze society and I see that particular TV shows lead to premarital sex. So my societal prescription is we should ban these TV shows, right? Ideally, this is how you would imagine this process works. What I find happens, unfortunately, all too often is what people do is they join social groups, and then with those social groups, they inherit something that I call like a constellation of beliefs. And this constellation of beliefs, instead of rationally building on each of them.
Stop! This is you! This is you! This is you. You do not even know how to operate as a person because you have a PhD in Dragon Ball Z. You have a PhD in Dragon Ball Z, and that's the only way that you can connect. Nigga, you are talking about yourself, bro. That's what you did. You were pro George Bush, pro leftist, okay? And you were atheist. You are describing what you endured. Yet, you are not viewing from actual people of the world that Jordan Peterson is the type of white boy. No, I'm not saying it's like that, but Jordan Peterson type of dude, right? Jordan Peterson is the type of dude to talk to, and I've read his book, so I'm saying this, from his words. He's talked to Mexicans, blacks, Indians, Asians, poor whites, middle-class whites, wealthy, rich, filthy, fucking inherited rich whites. He's talked to them all. Okay? He fits in with them all. Jordan Peterson is an actual people's person. Okay? How many times have y'all seen Jordan Peterson do interviews and he's just talking, or do podcasts and he's just crying? Because he just feels this compassion and sympathy for people. Regardless of, do you know how fucking wealthy and rich this man is? But this PhD, Dragon Ball Z, Star Trek, fucking League of Legends motherfucker is in front of him and is just saying shit, moving the goalposts, throwing the ball. Faulty incel jerk off marathon arguments, bro. Faulty as fuck. And I refuse to get my blood boiling the same way I refuse to allow Jordan Peterson to get his blood boiling throughout the duration of the interview, because is induced with a whole lot of semen hand. I'm not with it. I ain't shaking hand, nothing, nigga. Shut up.
These, you basically get this like Jenga tower that is like floating over a table, and every block is like supporting itself, and no real part of the tower.
He's talking about a video game. He is talking about fucking destroy the dinosaurs. He's talking about destroy the dinosaurs Jurassic Park video game. He's talking about Detroit Become Human.
Tower can be addressed because you pull out one piece, it all falls apart. So
Right.
people become like very stuck in all of this combined constellation stuff, and none of it is really given like any analysis, and you can't really push anybody from one way or another in terms of like reevaluating any of the beliefs that are part of this constellation.
It's not giving no analysis.
I wish I would have. If I
That's
would
good.
have yep.
That's fine.
I wish
That's
I would've-
right.
Sleep is the foundation of our...
I don't think Destiny knows that all these stupid taxes, livers, pulling everything goes to everything. But what it's supposed to go to. Yes. Yes.
Models now of
Sure.
There are models now of cognitive processing, belief system processing, that make the technical claim that what a belief system does is constrain entropy.
Sure, that's not surprising at all to
Okay,
me. Yeah.
so and now the signal for released entropy, which would be a consequence
Brain cells in the
of, say,
negative.
violated fundamental beliefs, is a radical increase in anxiety, right, and a decrease in the possibility of positive emotion.
Oh,
And
my
so people
goodness.
will struggle very hard against that, which is exactly the phenomena that you're describing.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with what you said.
So
Although,
here's my
yeah, so I'm not
issue
sure
or
why
worry.
it's relevant to the issue I was pursuing.
I'm getting
Okay, fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my issue, okay? So when I'm trying to evaluate a situation, I like to think that I have I've got some insulation from the effects of what liberals think or what conservatives think, is because on my platform, I don't necessarily have an allegiance to a particular political ideology. Like right now, I'm like center left to progressive, but I break really hard from progressive on certain issues. I think Kyle Rittenhouse is in the right. I think basically everything you guys are doing with indigenous people is insane, including the complete mass grave hoax. I think that I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I have beliefs where I can break from my side, you know, pretty hardcore because I am not like allegiant to certain political ideology.
He don't even believe that. I'm somebody who literally, I'm not even really about to go down a rabbit hole when it comes to religion and politics. Those in particular, because it deems, it holds people to this superiority and this exclusivity that is like, my God is not fucking with your God. Your God is not fucking with my God. So we're always going to be at an off-put, at separation with each other. But that's not the point of the human race. So I'm actually somebody who doesn't categorize themselves to left, right, up, that north, south, east. I'm really somebody who embodies that. And so is Jordan Peterson. So you're really telling him a philosophy of, something that he embodies. Don't you think that he can sniff out the bullshit that you're saying, destiny? And it's so ironic that your name is Destiny, because you look up the word and that is the complete opposite. And that's probably the play on words. Your name is Destiny. Your stage name is Destiny, but you are leading nobody to that, or even manifesting that to your supporters or whatever, your extra incel jerk off marathon buddies.
Theology. One thing that worries me with this constellation beliefs thing is that sometimes when it comes to evaluating a particular policy or a particular problem, I feel like it's part of the constellation, and sometimes it inhibits people from like taking a step back and reasonably thinking about the issue. So when we're talking about climate change,
And he didn't even address. Jordan Peterson went on for 10 minutes about the specific thing that he brought up, broke it down to the T. And
mentioned the WEF sacrificing tons of people, the UN,
Okay.
global elites, 5 times energy costs in Germany, genocidal people. I feel like this is part of like a whole thing where it's like, okay, well, let's take a quick step back and let's just like think rationally about this particular issue for one moment. Okay.
Well, you asked me what the motivation for anti-poor policies might be, so that's why I was trying
Well, I
to flesh
did,
that out.
but I got all of those things before I even asked that question. Because I think it's totally possible that somebody might say, okay, well, when you put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
I don't know why you started. That's like me going to school. I can't wait to debate about who's more of the GOAT, LeBron James and Michael Jordan at the lunch tables. I couldn't wait to do that. I couldn't wait to do that at practice. I couldn't wait. Shortly after fucking sophomore, junior year. Well, no, really, like in the sophomore year. What's the point of this? They don't give a fuck about me, know me, care about me, and what I'm holding in my mind is more heavy than something that's not invaluable, valuable that we can use to assist us in growth. Give a fuck who the GOAT LeBron James is.
Seems to cause an increase in surface temperatures. This has been happening from about the 1800s, and as we started to track surface temperatures, whether the thermometer is on top of the Empire State Building or in the middle of the field, it seems like there's an average rise in temperatures, and people all around the world are observing this. In some places more than others. If you live in Seattle and 20 years ago, your apartment building wasn't built with air conditioner units, you feel that now. If you live in a place in London and you've never had an air conditioner before, now that's not acceptable. I think that people on the ground can see that there are changes, and I think that scientists, when they look in labs, can see changes. It might be that some models aren't precise enough, and it might be that for reasons we don't even understand.
Well, the
now,
economic models certainly aren't precise enough.
Sure, maybe that might be true.
Maybe. They can't even use them to predict the price of a single stock for 6 months. The economic models are not sufficiently accurate to calculate out the consequences of climate change over a century. Not in the least.
I like the comparison because economic models can't predict individual stocks, but they do predict the rough rise of the market. If you invest in the S&P
except
500,
for the
you
odd
get
cataclysmic collapse.
Nope, even with the cataclysmic collapse accounted for, you're going to see about 7% returns on average with inflation over long periods of time.
I wouldn't call an average a very sophisticated model analogous to a climate change.
That's the difference between climate and weather, though. Right? Is that climate isn't going to tell you what the temperature is on a given day, but it might tell you the average surface temperature over a period of 1 year or 10 years. And then that's the difference between climate and weather. That's the difference between like the market and the stock.
Difference.
It is a hypothetical, but again, we're seeing more and more and more data every single year that things are getting hotter and hotter.
Let's jump out of our cloud of presuppositions for a minute.
Sure.
Now, one of the things that...
Or no, wait. Before we do that, actually, because I don't want to say, there are some things that we've gotten as a result of investing in green energy that have been good. So, for instance, the power of solar energy has dropped dramatically in the United States, faster than anybody thought possible, such that solar energy is like competitive or beating fossil fuels in certain areas. As long as you can set the solar panels up, you're literally beating fossil fuels.
Yeah, and as long as the sun is shining.
Well, it still is. We're not a nuclear winter yet.
No,
so.
But it isn't when it's cloudy. And
that's why I said depending on where you live. There are places, equatorial places, if you're trying to set up a solar panel in Seattle, you might not have as much luck, or New York City might not have as much. Or in Germany, true.
Or there are also, Europe, I think in Canada.
There are also other issues that are coming up that I think are obfuscating our ability to evaluate what's being...
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, from maybe from watching or checking out a clip from 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗴, I think they live in Texas. I think Texas or Florida, one of the two. Destiny. So that's project. It's just
being caused by green energy versus not. When we look at energy increases in Germany,
you can't even see outside
I think there's a similar constellation around nuclear energy, for instance. People don't want nuclear energy because they think of nukes, and they think of nuclear meltdowns, and they think of Chernobyl, and they think of Fukushima, and they think of atomic bombs, and that's it. And that's stupid. And I agree with you. But nuclear energy is a totally viable alternative to other forms of fossil
fuels. Then why
fuels.
does the radical left oppose it? You think it's just this
for the same reason the right opposes vaccines, because it sounds scary and it's a big thing and they don't trust it. It comes from
the right has a reason to distrust vaccines in the aftermath of the COVID debacle.
Well,
because they were imposed by force, and that was a very
You get to
bad
choose
idea.
if you have a nuclear power plant. That's imposed by force too, no? You don't get to choose where your energy comes from if you live in a country. You turn the light switch and hopefully you don't have a Chernobyl that melts down in your particular town, right?
Well, you get to choose it because you can buy it or not.
Well,
that's a choice.
It does, but
nobody had a choice with the vaccines.
Nobody had a choice whether or not they lived near Chernobyl.
And somebody like me, against all odds, fuck is y'all talking about? Everything in life is a choice. everything in life is a choice. Cool. I ain't wearing no mask either. I can count. Well, I mean, of course I wore a mask, but I can probably count on both of my hands, maybe another hand, how many times I wore a mask. Like to different places. Besides the gym, I wore that, but I wore that under my fucking lip. God, bro. Oh my goodness. This is starting to get painful, literally.
Or not. Nobody's a choice.
Sure,
There's a nuclear power plant.
Away.
Well, how realistic is it to move like 500 miles? That's like telling conservatives when Biden tried to do the OSHA mandate for vaccines, like, well, you can just get a different job, right?
I don't want to debate about whether or not
Which is
large nuclear power plants are frightening. They are.
Sure. Okay.
And there are technologies now where that's not a problem. And I think that's
do support nuclear power
counterproductive
plants. I
place
guess
for
it's
our
good.
discussion to go, because I also understand why people are afraid of it. But what I don't understand, for example, is why the Germans shut down their nuclear power plants and the Californians are thinking and doing the same thing when they have to import power from France anyways. Like it's complete.
Or burn coal, which is a million times worse.
Not just coal, lignite.
Yeah.
Right. And then with regards to these renewable power sources, they have a number of problems. One is they're not energy dense. They require tremendous infrastructure to produce.
My goodness, bro.
They might be renewable at the energy level, but they're not renewable at the raw materials level. So that's a complete bloody lie. They're insanely variable in their power production. And because of that, you have to have a backup system, and the backup system has to be reliable without variability. And that means if you have a renewable grid, you have to have a parallel fossil fuel or coal grid to back it up when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, which is unfortunately very, very frequently. And so, again, and I'm not going to say there's no place for renewable energy like solar and wind, because maybe there are specific niche locales where those are useful. But the logical, antidote to the problem of reliability, if we're concerned about carbon, but we're really not, would be to use nuclear. And the Greens haven't been like flying their bloody flags for 30 years saying, well, we could use fossil fuels for fertilizer and feed people, and we could use nuclear power to drive energy costs down in a carbon dioxide-free manner. That seems pretty bloody self-evident to me. And so then it brings up this other mystery that we were talking about earlier. You know, what's the impetus behind all this? Because the cover story is, oh, we care about carbon dioxide, which I don't think they do, especially given the willingness to sacrifice the poor.
people, yeah.
It makes no sense to me. And I think it's relevant to the issue you brought up, which is that people have these constellations of ideas, and there's a driving force in the midst of them, so to speak. They're not necessarily aware of what that driving force is.
Isn't it more likely that people are either misinformed or misguided than people are legitimately trying to depopulate the planet?
Look, misinformed and ignorant, that's plenty relevant and worth considering. And stupidity is always a better explanation than malevolence. But malevolence is also an explanation. And no, I don't think it's a better explanation, because
why would we waste so much money sending food aid, having Bush do, programs through Africa for AIDS, having other billionaires like Bill Gates invest so much money in anti-malarial stuff? Like, why would all the global elites be so invested in helping and killing the people here at the same time?
Well, some of it's confusion.
Oh, I get it.
Okay.
You know, and some of it's the fact, many things can be happening simultaneously with a fair bit of internal paradox, because people just don't know which way is up often. But the problem with the argument,
power plant.
Okay,
I get it.
So you tell me what you think about this. So Hitler's cover story was that he wanted to make the glorious Third Reich and elevate the Germans to the highest possible status for the longest possible period of time. Okay, but that wasn't the outcome. The outcome was that Hitler shot himself through the head after he married his wife, who died from poison the same day, in a bunker underneath Berlin while Europe was in flames. Well, he was insisting that the Germans deserved exactly what they got because they weren't the noble people he thought they were. And then you might say, well, Hitler's plans collapsed in flames, and wasn't that a catastrophe? Or you could say that was exactly what he was aiming for from the beginning, because he was brutally resentful and miserable right from the time he was, a rejected artist at the age of 16. And so he was working, or something was working within him, and something that might well be regarded as demonic, whose end goal was precisely what it attained, which was the devastation of hundreds of millions of people, and Europe left in a smoking ruin. And the cover story was the Grand Third Reich. And so there's no reason at all to assume that we're not in exactly the same situation right now.
I think there's a great reason to assume. I think that Hitler's motives and everything that he was trying to do wasn't a secret. I don't think that anybody had to guess that he was incredibly anti-Semitic, that his Aryan supremacy was going to lead to the destruction and the murder of like so many different people in concentration camps. Like none of this was a secret. It's not like he was hiding it.
He hid a lot of it.
I mean, like he tried to maybe hide the death camps, but nobody in Germany was wondering like, wow, crazy that pogroms are happening against Jewish people. That's so crazy. Or wow, they're all being shipped to just mainly the Jews to camps to work. Like that's kind of interesting. Or wow, he talks about this a lot in Mein Kampf, but maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't think you can compare like Hitler to people that are worried about climate change. The worry that I have here is because if we're applying this,
people in Germany thought Hitler was perfectly motivated by the highest of benevolent.
If I were to take this standard of evidence and apply this lens of analysis, couldn't I say the exact same thing about the conservative constellation of belief? They don't want to intervene anywhere in the world because they don't care about the problems there. They're anti-immigration because they hate brown people. Trump wanted to ban Muslims from coming to the United States because he's xenophobic. Conservatives don't want to have taxes to help the poor because they want homeless people to starve and die in the winter. Like I feel like
some of that's true, and yes, you can adopt that criticism. I think the difference with regards especially to the libertarian side of the conservative enterprise, but also to some degree to the conservative enterprise, is they're not building a central gigantic organization to put forward this particular utopian claim. And so even if the conservatives are as morally addled as the leftists, and to some degree that might be true, they're not organized with the same gigantism in mind. And so they're not as dangerous at the moment. Now, they could well be, and they have been in the past, but at the moment they're not. And so, of course, you can be skeptical about people's motivations when they're brandishing the moral flag.
Why would we say that they're not as concerned about the gigantism? I feel like everybody is when it's a particular thing that they care about.
You mean whether they would be inclined in that direction?
For sure. That conservatives wield the power of the government whenever they feel they need to, just as liberals do, right? Conservatives were very happy to see, for instance, abortion was brought back as a state-regulated thing.
That's a good objection. I think that you're correct in your assumption that once people identify a core area of concern, they're going to be motivated to seek power to implement that concern.
I think cancel culture is a good idea too. I think conservatives prior to the 2000s, if they could censor everything related to either LGBT stuff or weird musical stuff or stuff that they didn't want their kids to watch, conservatives would do it. But now that you see that like liberals and progressives are kind of wielding that corporate hammer, now conservatives are very much, well, hold on, we need freedom of speech, we need to platform everybody. And now progressives are like, well, hold on, maybe we shouldn't platform people.
I've got no disagreement with those things that you said, and I have no disagreement about your proposition that people will seek power to impose their central doctrine. Okay, so then you might say, and so we can have a very serious conversation about that, what do we have that ameliorates that tendency?
In the United States, we've got hopefully a form of decentralized government. I can't speak to Canada as much, but...
Yes, yes, that's true. So that's one of the institutional protections against that, because what that does is put various forms of power striving in conflict with one another, right? And so that's a very intelligent solution. But then there are psychological and philosophical solutions as well. And one of them might be that you abjure the use of power, right, as a principle. And so, and this is one of the things that was done very badly during the COVID era, let's say, because the rule should be something like, you don't get to impose your solution on people using compulsion and force. There's a doctrine there, which is any policy that requires compulsion and force is to be looked upon with extreme skepticism. Now, it's tricky because now and then you have to deal with psychopaths, and they tend not to respond to anything but force. And so there's an exception there that always has to be made, and it's a very tricky exception. But look, let me tell you a story, and you tell me what you think about this, because I think it's very relevant to the concern that you just expressed. And I don't believe that the conservatives are necessarily any less tempted by the calling of power than the leftists. That's going to vary from situation to situation. Though I would say probably overall in the 20th century, the leftists have the worst record in terms of sheer numbers of people killed.
So I mean, it depends on how we're quantifying
not
that.
Not really. Okay, we'll just quantify Mao. How's that? Direct death of 100 million people.
Woo!
So, you know, that's a pretty stark fact. And if we're going to argue about that, well, then we're really not going to get anywhere. So, and
I'm not disagreeing that the Holodomor happened as well. The Soviet Union and
Yes.
China were horrible.
20 to
I mean, I'm not
50
gonna.
million
Yeah, I'm not
people
gonna.
in the
I'm
Soviet.
not gonna
Yeah,
say
okay.
those were horrible
Well,
things. Yeah, of course.
and
Yeah.
it's a war of.
I'm just saying
He
for World War
wants
II,
to.
it depends on how much you attribute the war deaths to Nazi Germany, et cetera, et cetera. But sure, like largely speaking, I don't think that the left beat the right because the right wasn't trying. I don't think it's because Hitler's lack of trying led him to kill less people than who ended up dying during the Great Leap Forward or during the industrialization of the Soviet
Yes,
Union.
well, I also think it's an open question still to what degree Hitler's policies were right-wing versus left-wing, and no one's done the analysis properly yet to determine that.
Well, what do we
Because
consider?
it was a national socialist movement for a reason, and the socialist part of it wasn't accidental.
Well, but I mean, there was no, cooperatively formed businesses that were owned by all of the people for the people and distributed to the people. And I don't think redistribution was high on Hitler's list of
That's
things
true.
to do for.
That's true. It was
But
a
I do
strange
think that-
mix of totalitarian policy.
I don't think it was a strange mix. I think it was a bid to appeal to mid-left and center-left, the KPD and the German Socialist Party by calling themselves National Socialists. I think it was very much like an authoritarian, ultra-nationalist regime that pretty squarely fits with. People get mad if you call something far right or far left because they have an attachment
Well, you know,
to terms,
one of
but-
the things I would have done if I would have been able to hang on to my professorship at the University of Toronto would have been to extract out a random sample of Nazi policies and strip them of markers of their origin and present them to a set of people with conservative or leftist beliefs and see who agreed with them more. And that analysis has never been done as far as I know. So we actually don't know. And we could know if the social scientists would do their bloody job, which they don't, generally speaking. That's something we could know. We could probably use the AI systems we have now, the large language models, to determine to what degree left and right beliefs intermingled in the rise of National Socialism. So that's all technically possible. So, and it hasn't been done, so it's a matter of opinion.
Sure.
So,
I don't necessarily disagree. That's something you could do.
Okay, I was going to tell you this story. Okay, well, this
wants
has
to
to do
do
with
with
the use
everything.
of power. So, I spent a time with a group of scholars putting and analyzing the Exodus story, an Exodus seminar recently, and so the Exodus story is a very interesting story because it's what would you say? It's an analysis of the central tendency of movement away from tyranny and slavery. That's a good way of thinking about it. So the possibility of tyranny and the possibility of
We may have to
slavery
come back, y'all.
are
Seriously.
possibilities that present themselves to everyone within the confines of their life, psychologically and socially. You can be your own tyrant with regards to the imposition of a set of radical doctrines that you have to abide by and punish yourself brutally whenever you deviate from them. And we all contend with the issue of tyranny and slavery.
We may have to
And
come back, bro.
There's an alternative path, and that's what the Exodus story lays out. And Moses is the exemplar of that alternative path, although he has his flaws. And one of his flaws is that he turns too often to the use of force. So he kills an Egyptian, for example, an Egyptian noble who has slayed a Hebrew, one of Moses' Hebrew slave brothers, and he has to leave. There's a variety of indications in the text that he uses his staff, he uses his rod, and he uses power when he's supposed to use persuasion and legal or verbal invitation and argumentation. And this happens most spectacularly right at the end of the sojourn. So Moses has spent 40 years leading the Israelites through the desert, and he's right on the border of the promised land. And really what that means at a more fundamental basis is that he's at the threshold of attaining what he's been aiming at, what he's devoted his whole life to. And he's been a servant of that purpose in the highest order. And the Israelites are still in the desert, which means they're lost and confused. They don't know which way is up. They're still slaves. And now they're dying of thirst, which is what you die of, spiritual thirst, if you're sufficiently lost. And they go to Moses and ask him to intercede with God. And God tells Moses to speak to the rocks so that they'll reveal the water within. And Moses strikes the rocks with his rod twice instead, right? He uses force. And so God says to him, you'll now die before you enter the promised land. It's Joshua who enters and not Moses. Okay, and you might wonder why I'm telling you that story. I'm telling you that story because those concepts at the center of that cloud of concepts that you described are stories, right? They're stories. And if they're well formulated, they're archetypal stories. And this is an archetypal story that's illustrating the danger of the use of compulsion and force. No, and so one of the problems you're obviously obsessed by and that I'm trying to solve is what do we do as an alternative to tyranny, whether it's for a utopian purpose in the future or maybe for the purpose of like conservatives censoring music lyrics they don't approve of. And one answer is we don't use force. We do the sort of thing that you and I are trying to do right now, which is to have a conversation that's aimed at clarifying things. And so that's a principle that's something like the consent of the governed, right? It's something like, but it's also something like you have the right to go to hell in a handbasket if that's what you choose. And as long as you don't, in doing so, you're
Bring
not
me
in
along with
everyone's
you.
way too much. You have the right to your own destiny, right? And so, and you don't get to use power to impose that. That's the other thing that worries me about what's going on the utopian front, because the problem is, once you conjure up a climate apocalypse and you make the case that there's an impending disaster that's delayed, and you might say, well, delayed how long? And the response would be, well, we're not sure, but it's likely to occur in the next 100 or so years, which is pretty inaccurate. You now have a universal get out of jail card that can be utilized extremely well by power-mad psychopaths.
Oh, yeah.
And they
Narcs.
will absolutely do that.
Fucking
because
narcs.
power-mad psychopaths use whatever they can to further their
As
cause.
tactic. Yep.
So this is my issue, I think. This is my issue with a lot of people when it comes to political conversations.
Oh.
I think that everything you've said is true. And I think that all of it is, it's good analysis, but I feel like it just gets wielded sometimes in one direction, and then people kind of miss that it completely and fully describes their entire side as well. And the thing that I feel like the only solution for this is you hinted at it. It's more than just conversation, although that's a good start. We have to go back to inhabiting similar areas. We have to go back to inhabiting similar media landscapes. I think that the issue that we're running into right now more than anything.
You're a Star Trek incel with the community full of incels. What the fuck you mean, nigga?
Anything else is people live in completely separate realities at the moment, such that
Yes, because we do not realize who and what you are. We didn't realize that you can have a PhD as a female in going to spring break in Miami. You got a PhD in being a thought. You got a PhD so you can talk to Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson. Jesse Lee Peterson is a fucking jerk off, but at least he says what he is. He's a dumb slow black man, So
if we were even to describe basic reality, how many illegal immigrants came into the United States last year? That should be a factual number that we can know.
How many do you think?
Somebody, the actual number.
Body language. Huff, scratching the head, scratching the leg, about to lie, about to say some shit that he heard. He don't even know.
Can know.
How many do you think?
Somebody,
Scratch the head.
the actual number, probably in the hundreds of thousands. I think some conservatives think it's 3 million per year over the past 3 years.
And how the fuck is that anywhere in unison? How the fuck is that close in proximity whatsoever? 100,000 versus 3 million. Lord have mercy, yeah. I have 300,000, excuse me, I have 100,000 YouTube subscribers. Whole time I'm lying. I have 1,000. I have 3 million YouTube subscribers. Oh yeah? Oh shit, that's what's up, bro. All right, I'm gonna holler at you later. Go check his YouTube, Jaden Banks. You have 100,000. Well, that is vastly and largely different in numbers.
Because they look at border contacts or they look at asylum seekers and they're not looking at
I think
crossings
it's
and laws.
3.6 million.
Came into the U.S. and stayed?
Yes, through the southern border.
Okay. So
You know, the historical,
wait,
you know,
okay,
the
wait,
historical average is about 1 million.
I understand this.
right?
I understand this. Sure. Well, historically, there's like 13 to 15 million people full stop in the United States illegally. That's like the whole history of illegal immigration in the United States. But hey, maybe I'm wrong there, right? So we can say that's an example of us living in a fundamentally different reality.
Well, the Pew Research Group has established quite conclusively that the variability over the last 20 years for illegal migration in the south border is between 300,000 and 1.2 million.
Well, the Pew Research can only establish, I think, the number of people attempting to cross. I don't know if they can know. I don't know if Pew does like census analysis. I'd have to see.
Well, I don't. Well, that's a different issue, right?
Sure.
Because I don't know how you measure how many illegal immigrants there are actually in the country.
I understand. I
given
just
that
want to
they're
point
illegal.
out. I just want to point out. I agree with you. I listened to a lot of Rush Limbaugh growing up. I understand the fear of having a government agency say climate change. Therefore, we have a blank check to do whatever we want. That's a scary.
Which is what they are doing.
The conservatives do the same thing, though.
I'm not
They
claiming
did it-
otherwise.
Yeah, but the problem is, I think people don't talk about it. So, for instance, I heard. So we can pretend now that the conservative argument was just compulsory vaccines are bad because they infringe on my freedom. That wasn't the conservative argument. The conservative argument was that mass deaths were going to happen, mass side effects were going to happen. There was going to be all this corruption and stuff related to vaccine distribution, to the crazier theories were microchips and blah blah blah. None of that came true. Absolutely none of the conservative fear-mongering related to the mRNA vaccines came to fruition. But now that's all forgotten. And that was used
What do you mean
as an
none of it?
excuse
What
to-
do you make of the excess?
Imagine being able to transition.
We're done. On that note, WAD, we're done. We're finished here. Automatically had to interject. Well, what do you mean they weren't true? What do you mean none of them weren't true? Yeah, I will say we come back and we do, cause this hey, this is good. This is good. I gotta say this is heads and tails battling to see who's the better side of the coin here. But you know, nobody's really here to. Well, I can speak for the real man, Jordan Peterson. I can speak for the genuine side, the authentic side here. You know, I can speak for that. Wow, man. He's not focused on. He's not focused on. You know, being right or wrong here. Let's just get some plans of action. Let's just get some plans of action, and let's stop believing all the lies that are being told from the liberal and conservative, and mostly liberal. Oh my goodness. This is probably going to Patreon, man.